You are live on Shally's Alley. It is the last Shally's Alley of February, Friday, February 28th. And wait, is this one of those leap months or leap year things? No, it's not, right? Today is the last day of February.
I think there have been more than enough days in February already.
Yeah, no kidding. Let's just end this thing. Oh, man. So everybody, the man that needs no introduction, my friend Stefan.
Oh boy.
Stefan, what was that? I'm just gonna bite the bullet and admit to my mistake. I have known Mr. Rothberg for many, many, many years, since back when we both were handsome, and and for some reason, when I created the description for this episode, I just let autocorrect take over and correctly spell his name with a PH. And of course, I have caught more grief for that than I've caught for any other mistake that I've ever made in my life. So I'm so sorry about that.
No worries at all, Siobhan. No worries.
Coming from Shally or Shalindra, Shackle, Smeckle, I just the irony of it.
Surely you must be joking.
Surely I am joking. That's right. But here we have it. We are back, and man, it's been I want to say a couple of years since you came on the show last. And
that's why you look, happy and refreshed.
That's right. Yeah, I finally got over it.
And then now you're just repeating your mistakes.
It all comes back around. It's like a circle. It's
a virus
circle of life, or more like a merry-go-round, really. Oh, look, there it is again. Oh, look, there it is again. Oh, look, there it is again. But for real, though,
yeah,
I am deathly curious. For those of you that don't know you or follow you, which they should, folks, this is the let's just say preeminent expert in all things early career, founder of College Recruiter, and evangelist for the life of recruiting people out of universities. And a lot has changed.
Yeah.
A lot has changed. In fact, you said that as we were talking about this, there's been some significant impact in early career recruiting because of what's going on with DOGE, or whatever that department name is.
DOGE, right?
Yeah, that.
The meme coin that became a quasi-government agency.
Exactly.
Sort of is, or you want to dive into
what? Yeah, I don't see it because I've always been mystified by college recruiting. My version of college recruiting is I sourced people at the universities, and I messaged them in advance of an event, or I make connections and use college recruiting as a source, because that's kind of what I do. But I know there's so much more to it. And so what is this impact?
Yeah. So the impact is that I was thinking about when you and I were messaging the other day. It's not so much like at the sourcing point, the identification of the candidate, the engagement, getting them to apply, even hiring them. It's what I'm seeing is a really massive impact on candidates that have already started. They were hired maybe 3 months ago. They maybe were hired a year ago, because those people generally are in that probationary status. And one of the things that DOGE did is it basically fired, or is trying to fire, all probationary employees.
Okay.
And
which is basically early career.
so there are
Oh
loads
my
of
God.
people.
Okay,
There
I
are
didn't
loads
even.
of people. I was actually just on a call with one minutes ago who have worked for the federal government for literally decades, but moved from one agency to another. This particular person was hired by USAID in, I think, September, October. And so she was on probationary status because she was new to that agency.
Mm-hmm.
So
Even
she
if
was
you
terminated.
were in a different agency before.
Right, which wasn't something that I personally knew. And if you moved from one agency to another, you were with one for 20 years, and then a year ago you moved, you're probationary, you were just fired or attempted to be fired. Depends on how this all ends up playing out. But almost by definition, anybody early in their careers who would graduate would be probationary. So they've all lost their jobs. The other thing that's happened is that virtually every internship program with the federal government has been canceled. And that's hundreds of thousands of people.
Wait, but hold on a second, though. I do know about internships.
Yeah.
And that's not I mean, for the most part, those are, there's a period of time. I mean, an intern for a year or 6 months, that's not really even employment in the traditional sense, because frequently they're not expected to stay. I mean, it's one of the objectives to try to hire your interns, but you make a goal to hire the interns. It's not like an internship automatically turns into. So how is that even?
Well, they are hired. They're hired as temporary,
like a temporary employee,
right?
The
expectation is kind of like a contractor, that it's for a
try before you buy.
Yeah, temp to hire, whatever, but you're still an employee, right? So, if you go and work for like Six Flags in the amusement park, during the season, that you're not going to be employed there for, 20, 30, 40 hours a week for a year or two. It might be for 3 months. It might be for 6 months. It might be for 9 months.
There may be a specific set period of time.
Right. And the same thing with most internship programs. You're hired and you're expected to work for, say, 3 months. That would be pretty normal.
See, when I went to school, it was a cooperative education school. So we had 2 mandatory cooperative periods, which are specifically mandated to have a termination date, because it is like you have goals and objectives that you achieve, and the co-op employer signs off on your educational experience. So, I know that that's not the same as an internship. I mean, it is a co-op. But still, I don't see an internship as something that you should be terminating, because it's experience for the, I don't get it. I'm missing something.
Yeah, I think what you're not appreciating is that the goal here is not to get rid of poorly performing employees.
No, it's not.
Right?
It's because everybody that's recently hired.
Right, because if that was the goal, you would go after them with a sharp knife or sword or something, use your preferred adjective. A scalpel, I think, is probably a better, right? But instead they're going after with a sledgehammer. So the goal here is to undermine the effectiveness of these governmental agencies. Not all, but most. And a great way of doing that is to go after them with a sledgehammer, because let's be candid. When an organization is going through problems and employees choose to leave, the ones who choose to leave mostly are the ones who know that they can most easily find a great job someplace else. They're your highest performers. Right?
Because it's easier to leave.
Exactly. So the people that you tend to keep are the people who are going to be the least likely to be able to find a job someplace else. They tend to be your lowest performers. That's what we are getting with the DOGE. Now, there are people that I know that will say this is a good thing. We don't want our government to be effective. We don't want our federal government to
now we're getting
get
into
stuff done.
The nefarious.
Yeah. But there are people out there who are supportive of this for the reasons why it's happening, that they're trying to reduce the impact of the federal government on our lives. Okay, and this is one way of doing that.
Yeah.
From just some simply early career standpoint, if you get rid of all probationary employees, that's a really fast way to massively reduce headcount.
Yep.
And they have the least protections. So I
So
don't
it's
agree
easier.
with it, but it's rational. It's easier. It's probably going to be pretty effective. And I think caught up in that are the interns.
The BARF. Breaking news, acquisitions, research, funding. It's the week that was. It's a wonderful way to catch up on the week that was the week prior. Kind of a John Oliver-esque type of show. Ryan and I pitch each other's stories. We laugh. It's fun. You can watch it on YouTube, but you can also subscribe to the podcast. Give it a listen. Give it a look. Thanks.
Leading a growing business, it's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision-making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
Because they were the recent ones.
Sledgehammer, recent, probationary. Wow. I mean, we're seeing that some workers from like the was it the nuclear safety, whatever it was, that they've been rehired.
Yeah,
like,
that I
so
know.
They're clearly there have
that.
been some mistakes, and they're kind of.
That's what I was going to say, right? Maybe this wasn't.
I don't know if it was intentional.
Thought all the way through. Exactly right. Maybe internships weren't on the radar, but just got caught up. But I mean, I will tell you this, though. I had some firsthand experience with USAID myself. Folks might not know this. I'm a returned Peace Corps volunteer, and I did a full tour in the Peace Corps. And one of the projects that I initiated was I created a cooperative, an agricultural cooperative to store rice, because one of the most damaging environmental impacts to the rainforest, and this was an untouched rainforest, is because of the slash and burn economy, where they would, farmers encroach on the buffer zone and even into the protected land to grow rice, because the I guess the standard, or the way it's always been done, is you cut down the trees, and that provides fertilizer for your crop of rice. What they didn't realize, and what most of them don't know, is that the richness of the soil is only 10 centimeters deep in the rainforest. And so by cutting down the trees, you're essentially, yes, you are getting fertile land for a couple of seasons, but without the protection of those trees, it gets washed out very quickly, and it becomes, unusable land. So my job was to try to curb that encroachment, and I created a cooperative where they would store their rice so that they wouldn't have to turn to selling it. It's a bad economic equation when the rice producer makes rice out of their farm and then sells it to the merchants that come in truckloads at the harvest price, which is the lowest price of the year. And then those very same merchants come back 6 months later with that very same rice and sell it at 10 times the price because it's been stored. So the answer was, hey, why don't we create
and the reason that the farmer would be buying that is as seed, right?
No,
so that
they
can
buy it for food, because
they're buying it for food even.
Yeah.
Oh, so the farmer who's grown way more than they can consume themselves, they still have to buy part of that back just to feed their family.
All of it, because they can't store it.
Oh, wow.
Rice is very difficult to store.
Yeah.
The only way that they try to store it in 55-gallon drums, but unfortunately, most of the 55-gallon drums that you find in this part of the world are formerly used for malathion and other types of life chemicals that, lifetime chemicals. So what we did is we created silos where they could deposit their rice and build up essentially a bank account of their rice, and they would all pool their rice together. That way we could build a silo that had proper aeration, proper security, proper pest control, and then they would be able to withdraw their rice to feed their family and also sell it off peak market for higher money.
Right.
And so that was my project. And I went to USAID to obtain funding for that project.
Oh.
And at the time, I discovered I had hopes to become a member of the Foreign Service and join the State Department. That was kind of my trajectory. I discovered so many really bad and ugly things about the way that things get done that I completely abandoned my dream of joining state because of my experience with USAID. And it wasn't any one particular person's fault. There were many very helpful people that did the best they could, but the policies like Public Law 480 and these other policies that were there to further the U.S. interests didn't align with a small farmer trying to curb deforestation by storing rice. So what I thought USAID was about was entirely not about. And I was very disheartened and disillusioned. That doesn't mean that, the program deserves to die. I'm just telling you that I did encounter quite a bit of really well entrenched policies that were, in some cases, older than. They started during the beginning of the Vietnam crisis. So they're that old, and so I was there in the 90s. So there were 20-year-old policies already that were way out of date. So there's probably a lot of that going on. It just doesn't, but you're right. It seems like punitive. It seems like a sledgehammer to just try to solve a quick problem without looking at the impact that this has on college careers. But I want to ask you this question. Brutally cut through the noise, brutally honest truth about early career recruiting.
Yeah.
What I want to push you to challenge the outdated hiring practices and expose major blind spots, because government aside, maybe this is my ignorance. I expect that most college careers start in the private sector.
Yes.
So even if we completely flubbed this one, there's still a lot of hiring going on that employers do with early career. What is the most brutally honest truth that employers don't want to hear about early career hiring?
This might sound hard. It's actually really easy.
Yeah.
There is almost no statistically significant difference for benefit to hiring a student from an elite school.
Right. Okay.
And employer after employer, and this is mostly within what used to be called college recruiting, is now mostly called like early career, early talent, something along those lines. You still see companies with a college recruiting department or university relations, but a lot of them have changed. A lot of them have changed to early career, but if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it is a duck. So let's just talk about all of them. The reality is that the majority of the people in those departments really enjoy fancy corporate travel. When they go out, you wanted the brutal truth. Here it is, Shally, or Cindy,
I didn't
or
know
Siobhan, or Shally. We'll get back to that.
Sally,
yeah. So if you are a typical employer that's doing some university recruiting off of students and recent grads, the language that'll be used within those departments is recruiting at, going to those schools, getting your job postings to those schools. And so they look at each school as a source, just like a sourcer might look at LinkedIn, Indeed, whatever hunting ground they're using. Could be in-person events. It could be a parking lot outside your competitor's manufacturing facility, whatever. So if you're a university recruiter and you've been assigned these 5 schools, all of your incentive systems are built around networking with the career service offices, the professors, the department chairs, et cetera, at those schools, which means going there and buying them dinners, treating them to concerts, sporting events, whatever. In return, a lot of those recruiters will get they'll get really nice tickets to the homecoming football game. They get to stay in fancy hotels. They get nice steak and wine dinners. There's a lot of that. They rack up a lot of travel points when they do that. And then during off season, they can take their family on a nice vacation to Costa Rica.
So it's a junket. It's a press junket. Okay.
When I was in undergraduate business school, one of my professors referred to that as feather bedding. You kind of like create a nice cushy existence for yourself. Now, it's entirely rational for the individuals in that system to want that, to like that, to get back to that. I thought, wrongly so, in March of 2020, I should say, when COVID hit, and all these internship programs were under stress, some of them canceled. There was virtually no on-campus recruiting the next year. In the fall of 2020, 2021, there was almost no. I thought that was going to be the break in the chain. That link was going to be broken, and that large employers would realize we don't have to go on campus to recruit students and recent grads, and in fact, we shouldn't be going on campus because when we do, we're limiting ourselves to currently enrolled students at a very small number of schools who all kind of have the same professors and curriculum, regardless of their skin color, regardless of their gender or other characteristics. It's the opposite of diversity because they all come out with the same thinking. And a good large organization would want to fish from a large pond, a lake, not a small one. But the opposite ended up happening. As soon as it could snap back, it did. And so what we've seen is there's been some movement towards online, whether it's, a handshake or a college recruiter or a LinkedIn or whatever, but not nearly as much as I would have thought and not nearly as much as I think it should. So I think the big thing that a lot of people just don't appreciate is that the incentive structures that are built into recruiting often are to the benefit of the individuals, the recruiter, the hiring manager, not to the benefit of the organization.
And not necessarily intentionally.
Not
by like, we're going to do that, but more because it just sort of evolved into that.
I think it intentionally depends on who you're talking about. So if you're talking about the head of the university recruiting department, it absolutely is completely intentional.
Okay.
They're trying to ensure that they have a job. They're trying to ensure that they continue to have that nice travel and those other sorts of benefits that they get. If you're talking about the CEO of a large organization who doesn't really know what's happening in the weeds in talent acquisition and shouldn't, right? To be clear, if they're in the weeds for something like that, they're not doing their job. But I think that they would be oblivious to it. And this is the way we've always recruited. This is the way we are going to.
It's how it's always been done.
Yeah. I'm not against on-campus recruiting, but I am against organizations thinking and acting like it's the only way to hire these people. If you're an organization and you're looking to hire 2 interns for your engineering department and you've got 30 employees in your company, absolutely go to the school that's across the street from you.
And form a relationship with it.
Yeah, heck yeah. If you're an organization hiring 500,
that they need.
Yeah, if you're an organization trying to hire 500 interns, yes, go to the school that's across the street from you. And yes, go to 30 others that produce candidates. But you probably want to hire at least half of those people other ways from schools that are, in rural Alaska. You don't have to fly somebody up there to do it. You can, there are these things called video calls. There are these things called job boards.
Travel there.
Yeah. So, like anything else, you want to diversify. And if you bring in people, 500 people from the same 20 schools year after year after year, you're going to end up with everybody thinking the same way. And that's not healthy.
Well, so yeah, that's homogenous thinking, right? So there's a company in the Bay Area that I worked with for a while, and they are just predominantly Stanford graduates that work there. And
Yep.
yeah, you know what I'm talking about. And I did notice when I was there that there's a very much like everybody thinks the same way because of having the same educational foundation, the same way of thinking and everything. So I get that. But I wanted to.
Can I address a question? Garrick Chan, who I think you know well, I do.
I do, yeah.
Okay, so he asked, I think, a fantastic question, and he's basically saying, he's kind of challenging the, just using his example, would somebody from Santa Monica Community College have the same chances as someone from Harvard? And I think what he's basically saying is somebody from a community college is likely to be maybe less, maybe more, as productive in your workplace as somebody from Harvard. And if I can take a minute, I can share some, like, an actual story from an actual employer that we all know.
Please do.
So I was at a conference probably 10 years ago, but that was hosted by Carrie Arnott and Mo Hutt. And at the time they were running together a company called Meritage. And they had a conference for basically program managers. And I was talking to a university recruiter from Lockheed Martin. And what he told me was that they had just tested hiring 10% of the students, for mostly engineers, from various online sources. I don't even remember if College Recruiter was one of them. So it's not about us. It's just online versus on campus. So 90% on campus, the way they had traditionally hired, 10% online. And he said, what we expected to find was that the 10% that we hired online would be a lot less expensive to hire because you don't have all the travel costs and all of that. Staff time is far lower to hire somebody online than going on campus. But what we also expected to find was that the students that we hired from the Stanfords would be far more productive than the ones that we hired online.
Not the case.
And he said the opposite was the case. Yes, online was cheaper, but more importantly to Lockheed was that the productivity of the students hired from, let's call them second tier schools, was higher than from the first tier elite schools. So
what was that attributed to?
Exactly. So, like, first of all, I thought I didn't hear him right. So I questioned him. And so what he said was that the students from the elite schools, virtually none of them stay with Lockheed Martin for more than a year or two.
Oh.
The students from the second tier schools, I went to the University of Minnesota. He included that as a second tier school.
What? I take offense to that. I studied physics there.
Well, it's not Ivy League. Let's be candid.
Oh, okay.
It's a very good school, but it's not Ivy League. Well, since you left, it's not Ivy League. When you left, it stopped being Ivy League. But anyway, so the students from a second tier school will tend to stay with them for 5 years, 10 years, or longer. So the students from the top schools, when they're coming in, they're better qualified. They probably are like smarter, better critical thinkers, call it what you may, but they don't last. So by the time they kind of get trained up and become productive, they're productive for somebody else. They're not productive for you. Oof. And I think this is part of the problem when talent acquisition is disconnected from productivity metrics. If you only know that your candidate appears to be well qualified when they're hiring, and then you lose sight of what happens to that person after they're in your workforce, how do you get that nice feedback loop of, like, I thought that Cindy was really good. She ended up being fired 3 months later, and there are 30 more like her. I need to stop hiring those Cindys. But if you don't know that the people you helped hire are not performing well, how can you correct that? If you don't know which of your employees is performing really well, the people that you helped get hired are performing really well, how do you look for more people like that? So I think, you rely on what the hiring manager tells you, but do some hiring managers know?
Probably not. If they're
But
too far
yeah,
removed from that,
yeah,
I would say. So, interesting. I'm glad you dug into that. I was going to ask about that. Interesting comment that I think this was something that you mentioned. Oh, I'm going to put up this comment.
I was just reading the same one. This is great.
Yep.
Yeah. So
you had made this comment once before. I think when I was asking you about preparing my kids for early career recruitment, and this was some years ago. You said that I may have misinterpreted, so let me just correct it here. It may be a better idea to have them complete preliminary courses at community colleges.
Yes.
And finish their education at a brand school. So first 2 to 3 years of school, go to the school that's nearby, and costs less, but is still a good school. Like we have a lot of them here in Georgia that are good schools. They have good names, but they don't cost the same as MIT or Stanford. And then they can finish their last year, because what employers really look at is where the degree came from.
Correct.
So is that still sound advice? Did I interpret that correctly?
You did, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's another issue. So there are a couple things. You mentioned one of the benefits. So the employer that's recruiting, seniors, fourth year students, or perhaps even from like juniors looking for internships in between their junior and senior year, they're going to see that you're attending Emory, University of Minnesota, MIT, wherever it is, right? And that's what's going to matter the most to them. So that's a really good benefit to graduating, maybe going from your last 2 years at a brand name school. The cost savings of going to a second or third school, or as Garrick said, like Santa Monica Community College, it's far less expensive to go to a community college or a second or third grade school. And so the student loans that you graduate with are far smaller, which gives you a lot more flexibility about where you look for work. There's another benefit that I see as well, and that is very few of us, when we're 17, 18 and deciding, are we going to go into post-secondary? Where are we going to go? What are we going to major in? Very few of us know where we're heading in life. A 17-year-old is a heck of a lot more like a 12-year-old than they are like a 25-year-old. And 12-year-olds don't know what they want to do for their whole lives. They might think they do, but as soon as they get out into the real workplace, they find out, virtually all of them, that that's just not something that actually works out. Like, how many 12-year-olds ever thought that they would end up in HR? Right?
I can tell you, my 12-year-old was sent to this business city in a school here, where it's like they have like a Chick-fil-A and a Sears and a Walmart. And it's like a make-believe. They call it tiny town. And everybody gets assigned a role. You get assigned the role of like working the cash register or whatever. And my son was, I don't know why he was picked for this, but he was selected by the group to be the CFO of the power company, Georgia Power, basically. And so he had to for the entire day of school day, he had to write checks and pay bills. And he came home and he's like, Dad, the CFO does a lot. I didn't realize it. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of why they teach you these things. But what did you expect the CFO was going to do? And he's like, well, I just thought the CFO just had all the money, but I didn't realize that people come to them for, they make decisions and they ask questions about product and all that stuff. I'm like, yeah, that's you're just as powerful in a lot of ways as the CEO. And you have to have, you and the CEO have to have to align. And he goes, but the CEO didn't do anything all day. He just sat there and shook hands with people. And I was like, oh my God, how realistic is this?
The Use Case podcast is where technology vendors get to talk about themselves. And it's a wonderful place for vendors, investors, and practitioners to listen to the story of the solution, the features, the benefits, the attributes, etc. And we get to know the CEO or founder during the call, and we also get to know the tech. So subscribe to the Use Case podcast.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your Hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, can we see more candidates? Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
So I will not tell my wife, who is our CEO, that you were trash talking.
No, I'm talking about the CFO being like overworked, underappreciated member of the executive suite.
Yeah. And 12-year-olds don't know what a CFO is.
No, he had no idea. Well, he came back and he was like,
very
I
eye-opening.
want to be the CFO. It's too stressful.
Right.
Now, I think also that a lot of it had to do with the fact that the kid that got selected to be the CEO was probably the popular kid, and he probably didn't do any of the things he was supposed to be doing. Just being the popular kid, like I'm sure that there wasn't. My son took his job seriously and therefore was overwhelmed with all the actual things he had to do.
And isn't it great that when you look at the Fortune 1000 and who some of the CEOs are, that none of them are just like the popular kid who sit around doing nothing. Like clearly
sarcastic.
Yes, exactly. So the community college route, I think, is a fantastic route. College is not for everyone, but that doesn't mean that it's a bad route for anyone. It is a really good route. The reality is you have a far greater chance of getting into a well-paying job if you have any kind of college degree. You don't need to go to Stanford in order to get a well-paying job. You can go to a community college. You can go to a state four-year school. GPA is now almost completely unimportant to the vast majority of employers.
As long as you have a graduation,
right? Exactly. They're looking for people. Generally, they're looking for people who have a college degree. If you happen to have a college degree and a high GPA, it gives you a tiny advantage. If you happen to have a college degree from a school that they're familiar with, that they like, it gives you a tiny advantage. There are certainly loads of exceptions.
And these tiny advantages do add up a little bit.
They can. It's not going to be.
The bottom line is you have to have a degree, and it's not.
Yeah, that's the most important thing. So it's it's not binary. It's not a zero-sum game. It's not Stanford or nothing. If you're choosing between Berkeley and Stanford, maybe you choose Stanford. But choosing between a community college so you can perhaps
none
even
at
work
all,
or none at all, community college is a heck of a lot better. And then maybe in those 2 years, you're going to kind of find yourself. You're going to maybe mature. Maybe you're going to realize, what engineering is for me. If I'm going to be an engineer, I need to have a 4-year degree, because that's what you have to have as an engineer. It has to be a 4-year engineering degree. So there are majors that matter. There are schools that matter, but that's the exception, not the rule. The reality is the vast majority of college and university students are employed by large organizations. on the corporate side, not the government side. And their major has almost nothing to do with their occupational field. So you will see like one of my kids graduated with an environmental sciences major, and she's a data analyst, in the HR tech space. She's not using her environmental work. Now, does she want to get back to that? Yes. But that wasn't her first job out of school. I see this over and over and over again. You see history majors going into sales. You see English majors going into customer support.
Because the foundation of education is not for the profession necessarily.
Yeah, it's critical thinking
and being able to. Yeah, right. So Garrick asked the question, and I have a question to follow up on that, and I also wanted to put this up because I think it's funny. But Garrick had a question. What about external? And I think what he means is extracurricular. So joining fraternities, societies, clubs, those kinds of things. Is that beneficial?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Those extracurricular clubs, a couple of things that just come to mind right away. Number one is you've got a built-in network. The people who are in, say, that fraternity or sorority or your varsity soccer team or whatever, your older classmates that are, say, 2-3 years ahead of you, you can then network with them. You can stay in touch with them. They can help you find a job, whether it's within their organization or at another that maybe they're working with. So you've got a really nice network there. When my wife was moving, before I knew her, when she was moving from Michigan back here to Minneapolis, where she went to high school, one of the things that she did is she went to her career service office at the University of Michigan. She had already graduated and basically said, can you connect me with University of Michigan alumni who are in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro so I can network? And they gave her a list, which today would be on LinkedIn, is how you would do that, right? And she basically went down that list and she had a whole bunch of informational interviews until she got to the point where somebody basically said to her, no, I'm not going to give you advice or tell you who you should talk to next because I think I want to hire you.
Nope.
Right?
Okay.
Bingo. Now, it doesn't have to be that much of a home run, but that kind of a home run does happen.
Does exist.
Another really a big advantage of being involved in the fraternity, sorority, club sports, whatever, is it demonstrates leadership.
Right.
And a whole lot of employers really value that. If you go to the right school and you have the right major in their eyes and you have some kind of leadership quality, boom, they're all over you like a cheap suit, in a good way. I did notice that a little bit earlier on in the thread, somebody mentioned about banning yoga pants on college campuses. So two things. Number one is I don't think we should be treating women's clothing different than men's. I don't
know if that yoga pants comment was specifically related to gender, just the pant itself.
Okay. It's usually when I see stuff like that, it's about like body shaming women, and that
right.
I just didn't want to leave that there because I don't think that's right. The other thing is maybe the comment was directed at me, that he doesn't want to see me wearing yoga pants. And that's entirely fair.
Absolutely. The same here. I don't want to see you in yoga pants. No, I think it was just a snide remark about the item of clothing as opposed to. But you're right. It could be interpreted many other ways, which are not so nice. So, community college to a larger campus. Well, no, not necessarily. I mean, you could still go to a larger campus and then join. I mean, I was a founding member of our fraternity in college, and by founding member, I mean the group that I was with. We started that. We rushed a national and started that charter there, and we had a pretty big diversity of students that were members. I mean, we had some folks that were in there. Master's programs and everything. So there was, it wasn't your typical freshman year kind of thing, but that's not necessarily always the case.
And I think it's a good point that if you go to a community college or trade school or something like that, and then transfer, you're losing a year or two at that 4-year school.
Supposedly, yeah, I guess.
is that without consequence? No. It's a good
Because you
point.
graduate later, you mean?
You might graduate later, but even if you have like 2 years at the community college and then you graduate, and then you move to the 4-year school and you graduate in 2 years. So you're still graduating in 4 years. Many of them do, but you do lose that first and second year at the 4-year schools. You do lose some of those connections.
Okay.
But I think that the benefits for most
the risk.
outweigh the harms. And so it's not that it's without anything negative. But I think the negative is much more outweighed.
There's
by the
definitely
positives.
enough. So weigh the options, weigh the benefits with giving your children, your young adults, I guess, advice. So that actually, now I have two questions. The one question I was going to ask before, I'm going to hold off on that. So this prompts a different question, which is, what about things like gap years? I mean, is graduating on time, really, like if you're 24 versus 23, or how heavy does that weigh? Because sometimes, I mean, I wasn't one of them, but we had plenty of students in my college that switched majors, and they kind of took a year off to figure that out.
Yeah, I was also one that went straight from high school, right into a 4-year undergrad, right into a 3-year grad school, right into the workforce. And I look back on that, and for myself, I think that was the right path, because I think if I had taken a gap year, I probably never would have gone back.
But for those that for medical reasons or whatever, like how consequential is it to have a gap year in between? And maybe it wasn't even changing majors. Maybe it simply was you had to go make some money and in order to be able to pay for it. Or
I think for the vast majority of young adults, it's fantastic.
And it won't be noticed.
And I mean, okay, so I graduated, I just turned 18. If I had taken a year and gone and traveled, worked abroad, just went in, worked flipping burgers, whatever, I would have been a hell of a lot more mature going into the undergraduate program.
That's what I suspect, yeah.
And I think I probably would have done better. And if I had especially taken a year or two off in between undergrad and grad school, I definitely would have done better in grad school. And I did fine, but I wasn't as mature as a number of my classmates. Like, so one of my closest friends to this day, I went to law school with him from 88 to 91 is when we went to law school. He had already been working as a civil engineer for, I think, 6-7 years. So when he came back to school to go through law school, he really knew what he wanted to do. And he was far more mature than I was and a lot of our classmates. So he excelled. And the studies, what he brought to the class, what he understood from the materials we were talking about was far ahead of me. Everything I knew came from a book. Most of what he knew came from real life. So I see employers really valuing like ex-military. You've served 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, whatever. Maybe on the GI Bill, you go back to school, you graduate with a nursing degree, whatever it might be. Wouldn't you rather hire that person than somebody who went straight through school?
Well, sometimes people graduate at 17 because of the timing of our admissions into school. I, for example, graduated when I was 17, not 18, and so will my son, because he like literally missed it. Like, he's the oldest in his class because of that. So there's kind of and he's been pushed ahead in order to make up for that. So there's a little bit of that, but I was thinking more along the lines of like in some cultures, in some countries, Europe and in other places where they are expected to do a year of like community service.
Yes.
Or,
love it.
It's not necessarily military if that's not, but it could be working, as an ambulance. What do they call that?
Like a paramedic or something.
Yeah, exactly that. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me go back to the other question that I was going to ask.
Sure.
Well, now I have two. So the first one is trade schools. Not necessarily getting a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
And maybe not necessarily even a degree per se, but actually like a trade.
Mm-hmm.
Is that still, early career, if you go into, and I'm trying to use as a good example, I don't know, welding or and there's got to be plenty of examples out there that are non-degreed schools
Absolutely.
that produce people that make a pretty decent living doing, electricians and things like that. How is that being impacted or affected, or is that out of our
impacted or affected by
everything going on right now, DOGE and
well, because it was such a broad brush, a sledgehammer approach. There's, at least as of right now, any probationary employee is just
even
gone.
trade school and everything.
Now, one thing about the federal government, and when people look at like what's the average salary of a federal government worker versus what's the average salary of like private employer or people employed in private industry, the federal government is heavily skewed towards office workers.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You don't have very many like welders and fast food workers. You do, but it's not to the same extent as.
But I mean, industry. Because the people who do that, they work for companies that work for like Lockheed and Boeing and aerospace companies. They hire people that are.
Sodexo is going to run the food service at the V, right? So are you if you're working
trades?
If you're working in the kitchen in a VA, you're a Sodexo employee. You're not a VA employee. So if they were to take that into account, then the wages from the federal government would actually probably be less than corporate America.
Yeah.
But whatever. I think your point though is all of the terminations, the hiring freezes, is that as likely to hit trades as say English majors?
Probably not.
And I think trades are going to be safer. The one thing I don't want to get away from though is that there's this narrative, and it's very often by people who have a college degree, often a graduate school degree, would not have gotten into the place they are without those. They work at a big investment banking company and they will say people shouldn't go to college. And it's like at all. And it's like, let's take a look at your family, your kids, your nieces and your nephews. And are you telling them they shouldn't go to college and that they should instead become a welder? If so, you're walking the walk, and I respect that. We might disagree, but I'll respect that. But when you're telling your own family one thing and telling the general public the other, I call bullshit on that. And they should be ashamed of themselves.
My son is going to definitely, and he
I
wants
think
to go
trades,
to college.
If that's what you're good at
Mm-hmm.
and you like that and you value that, hell yes. Go to trades, become
My daughter wants to go into design and graphic design and things like that. And my son actually wants to do engineering. So it's either what. That's where I was wondering if the outlook for, and also connecting to the other question before I forget, we talked about the enrollment cliff last time. The enrollment cliff last time, the projected decline in number of college students and graduates.
Yeah.
Is that still, so put these two together, are we still seeing an enrollment cliff? Is it getting worse or is it getting better? And are trade schools the answer to that problem or not, or just another problem?
Okay, let me chew on the trade school being an answer in it for a second, because the other part of what you're asking is really important. Yeah. Yes, there's still an enrollment decline. Some of that is simply demographics. The largest high school graduating class in history was something like 12, 13, 14 years ago now. Okay. So like I have one of my nieces is, I think she's 31 or 32. She was a member of the largest graduating high school class in history, U.S. history. And so it's been on more or less a steady decline since then.
Just because of fewer births.
Correct.
That's
right?
one factor.
And one consequence that we're seeing from that is that some of the second, third tier schools have closed. You probably every once in a while will see something like XYZ college that had 600 students has closed.
Yeah.
That's an impact. What's not really being talked about much, but it goes back to the whole DOGE thing, is that there's clearly going to be a massive cut in investment or spending, depending on which word you prefer, from the federal government into colleges and universities. And that is going to cause some of these schools to close. And that will inevitably create an enrollment decline. Now, what's going to happen to those students? Some of them are going to be stuck in lifelong poverty, working in some of the jobs that some of these commentators want for others, but not for their own kids.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to be working fast food. They're going to be working in warehouses, whatever, because they
lack the education.
Because they lack the education in order to work in a profession where most of the muscle that you use is between your ears rather than on your arms. The other thing that is going to happen then is, with that reduced spending from the feds and some of these schools closing, is it's going to become even more expensive to go to college, which is going to force out,
and perhaps also more demanding to apply. Like our admissions are going to become harder.
Right. So the
harder to get in and cost more.
Harder to get in, cost more, and it's a simple supply and demand issue.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Your seats
with
essentially.
Pell Grants, which I was a beneficiary of, millions a year Pell Grants are probably going to go away. So people from lower income are not going to be able to afford to go to college or university. And we're going to get into this caste system, is my fear. Where that part of what a lot of people love about this country, including me, is that almost anybody can get into the middle class or even become wealthy. At least there's the possibility of that happening for almost anybody.
Okay.
If we get into a caste system, Shally, because you were born into poverty, it's simply not an ability for you to go to college.
Perpetuates.
Then it's going to perpetuate it. And I don't think that any one of us should want that.
No, because that's an erosion of our liberties, of the American dream, and the pursuit of happiness, and doing what you want to be able to do. It may be very difficult for someone in a disadvantaged neighborhood to make it to become a doctor, but they still can. If that happens, then what you're describing, then they won't be. I mean, right now it may be very difficult, but then it would become impossible.
Yeah, like I can grab a basketball and I can go to the free throw line and I can shoot 10 times and I might get one or two of them. It's possible for me
exactly.
Right? It's possible for me to get a basket, but if I'm like up against somebody who actually knows what the hell they're doing and they're going to get 9 out of 10 baskets, right? So, is it possible?
But what you're describing is that you wouldn't even be invited to go on you wouldn't even get a chance to do it, whether you had the skill or not. No,
right.
I don't think so, Garrick. We're not quite there yet. I think that's the danger that Stephen's describing.
Yeah, I think it's a spectrum. There are definitely elements of our society that are consistent with a caste system, but it's not full blown like it is in some other countries.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, what you're talking about is a much higher barrier for moving across, almost like what you see in those dystopian movies where there's like the wall around the different, castes, but not, virtually, not physically. So trade school is still a viable option. And I guess what I'm wondering is, because there are some jobs that do require a great degree of specialization, even though they don't necessitate a degree. In other words, like, and I'm trying to think of something, if you worked in the Navy in a submarine and were exposed to the nuclear reactors that are used on those submarines, you may not have a college degree, but you have a skill set and know how to work around radioactive equipment, and you could still have a very profitable career in and around nuclear power without necessitating a college degree. So there are options. Just wondering how much that's being eroded by this. Is the same cliff happening to that? Or are we seeing the shift of people who don't go to college to get traditional degrees, whatever that means, going to trade schools instead? Or are they just not going to anything?
Hey, it's Libby DeLucian. If you're sick of business advice that sounds cute, but doesn't actually move the needle forward, this one's for you. The Libby DeLucian podcast is where we go one layer deep. No gurus, no glitter, just straight up unfiltered talk about scaling a business, running a household, and holding on to your sanity in the middle of the chaos. If you're the bottleneck in your business or in your own life, I'll show you how to fix it. Simple, tactical, and one layer deep every time. Let's go. Visit libbyd.com and check out our podcast today.
Hey, I'm Katie Van Horn.
And I'm Jackie Clayton.
We're your hosts of the Inclusive AF podcast, where we take on DEI, leadership, and HR without all the corporate fluff.
That's right. We've got decades of experience, a lot of opinions, and zero tolerance for performative anything.
Every week, we dig into what it really takes to build inclusive workplaces with honesty, strategy, and a few side eyes.
We'll talk about the tough stuff, power dynamics, privilege, what's broken in the system, and how we can all do better.
And don't worry, it's not all heavy. We bring receipts, laughs, and real talk from people actually doing the work.
Think of it as your weekly dose of truth, tips, and a little tea to help you lead with intention and show up for your people.
So if you're ready to push past the buzzwords and get into the actual work of inclusion,
you're in the right place. So subscribe to the Inclusive AF podcast.
New episodes drop every week.
Catch us on Spotify, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts.
We'll be here breaking it down one inclusive convo at a time.
And I like this comment about apprenticeships. I do believe apprenticeships are a really good option.
Yeah, I've definitely disagreed with a lot of whatever that person has written, but that one, 100% totally agree. Apprenticeships, and for those who aren't familiar with them, do a little bit of Googling. Way more popular in Europe, especially in countries like Germany, than they are here.
Learning a trade through.
They're fantastic on-ramps to
Why don't we do
lots
that
of
here?
different professions. We don't do that here because our university system is basically for profit. And it's not in not in the best interest of a
apprenticeship.
So there's this
along the side of the trade school.
Yeah, and I'll definitely want to come back to are there more? Let me answer the trades one first. Are there more people going to trades? I don't know.
Because
I'd be really interested to learn that. I could see that being the case. Like anything else, there are going to be people who maybe couldn't get into a traditional liberal arts college or university who absolutely will not go to trades, right? They're going to be those people.
Their school,
they're going to be people.
They don't have an option. They can't go anywhere because they can't.
Yeah, they're no interest, whatever. But they're going to be people who are on the margins. I'm not sure if I should get a history major or if I should become a chef. Those people that on the margin, I think, are going to be more likely to go to culinary school rather than becoming a history major. I think there'll be some of that. I think that's inevitable. But to go back to your point about, or what we were talking about with apprenticeships, the beauty of apprenticeships is that it's like when you talked about co-ops versus interns, internship is usually 3 months long. Co-ops are usually a year, sometimes two. Apprenticeships are even longer. And when an employer takes you in as an apprentice, there should be no expectation that you know jack shit about anything because you're probably 16, 17. In a lot of countries, it's actually an alternative to a high school degree, not even just a college degree. And then by the time you're 18, 19, 20, you are like an expert at working that piece of production line equipment, whatever the apprenticeship is
printing
they are almost inherently better suited for an industrial economy than an information economy. The way that they've been used mostly is in manufacturing. But there's nothing inherent about apprenticeships that say that you have to
construction or
you could hire somebody as an apprentice and teach them accounting, right? That's all here.
Or white hat hacking. I mean, how many of these white hat hackers don't even have computer science degrees? They just learned through the school of scrappiness and scripting, and they just kind of figured it out.
Yeah. So I think one of the big reasons why the U.S. and some other countries, like there are more apprenticeships per capita in Canada than there are in the US. Canada is more like Europe than the US is, right?
Okay.
So it kind of stands to reason. But they're so much more popular in other countries than here, I think, because there's this sort of evil symbiotic relationship between the government, the banks, and higher education. So the banks very much want universities and colleges to thrive because you get a lot of people taking out student loans, and it's the only kind of debt that is not dischargeable in bankruptcy.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
All right.
The government wants that as well because the government funds a lot of those student loans. A lot of those student loans, like when interest rates were super low during COVID, like they were basically at zero, student loans were still at 6, 7, 8%. The government was profiting off of students going to colleges and universities. It's a profit center for the government. And because they're not dischargeable, there's very little risk to the federal government in people defaulting. If they made those loans defaultable, if you could default on a student loan, you'd see a lot of people defaulting. That would cost the US Treasury and therefore us as taxpayers a lot of money. The banks wouldn't make as much. You'd see a lot of colleges and universities going out of business. So there's a three-legged stool there that each of the three of them are very dependent upon each, and nowhere in that picture are apprenticeships. If apprenticeships become big, you don't have as many going to college, university. You don't have many taking out loans. The Wells Fargos of the world, they don't get their origination fees, their servicing fees, and the federal government doesn't make money off of the interest. It's reprehensible. It's just
basically just for that particular trade.
That
person.
Yeah. And some people might be like, wait a second, I thought you worked for a company called College Recruiter. Shouldn't you be in favor? And it's like when I started this company and we weren't doing anything in recruiting at all, it kind of evolved into a job search site. The reason we call it College Recruiter is because that was the job title overwhelmingly that our customers had. They worked for large companies. They were hiring students and recent grads, but always since day one, we've been more about any kind of early career employment, not just internships for college students.
Okay. Yeah.
Right, Siobhan?
That's right, Stefan. I'm never going to live this down, and rightfully so. My friend, it has been illuminating as usual, and I really need to have you on the show more frequently.
I would be happy.
Because we talk about very important things that I don't think enough about. But I can't let you off the hook. I always have to ask this question, and you know it.
Yeah.
Who should be our next guest?
Who should be? Okay, so I was debating this. I would love to see you bring on, if you want to sort of continue or get more of an insider perspective on what's happening with federal hiring and how that's going to impact private industry.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a few people that I know, but one that I know is going to be a guest with me on Recruiting Brain Food, Hung Lee's publication, on March 21st. And that's Mike Bruni, Bruni, with Talent Acquisition Strategies. Mike worked inside the federal government, including in intelligence agencies. And I was a moderator of a panel with him and Roy Hartsfield. Both of them came out of the intelligence agencies in June. We talked about how do you do business with the federal government? What does contracting look like? That type of thing. And so Mike's going to be on Recruiting Brain Food to talk about like the impact of DOGE, not just on government hiring, but how that's going to spill over into talent acquisition in the corporate side in the US and globally. I can't think of a better person. And Garrick, the only reason I can think that you would want to see me in yoga pants is if you want to destroy your eyesight. And the reason that you'd want to destroy your eyesight is so that you can get a service dog. I think you should just go adopt a dog,
Get a dog.
and not have to go through the whole service.
Absolutely.
There's a better path to getting
It's very
a dog.
painful. It's very painful.
Yeah.
Yeah, but believe it or not, I actually know Mike Bruni, and I would be
Sweet.
very happy to bring him on if he'd accept the invitation. We actually did a project together. So, well, thank you very much for being an honored guest and allowing me to murder your first name. It won't happen again, but I promise you that. Everybody, thanks a lot for coming on the show today. If you are interested in next episode, we have Cassandra Dent, former colleague of mine from Fiserv, who has now launched her own firm, and we have some interesting entrepreneurial questions to ask her. So hopefully we'll see you back here next week. Until then, be kind to yourselves. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
I get it. The podcast just isn't enough. That's all right. Head over to your favorite social app, search up Work Defined, WRK Defined, and connect with us.